Hello, hola, mis amigos. That means hello, my friends. Because we really are friends, and we're taking a journey through history. And this is the history of Eastern Europe in the late 19th century. What's going on in Austria? Well, we can summarize this in a couple of quick hits here. In 1867, the Austrians had lost to the Germans in the Austro-Prussian War. The Hungarians, you might recall that they had made a big movement for more rights back in 1848. They have another revolt. This time they're going to be successful. This time they're going to push for a dual monarchy. Now, for your purposes, not going into 19th century Austrian history as a major in that, basically just say like, oh, this is called the Ausgleich, and you don't really have to say it like that. Just know that word, Ausgleich, here. Whoop. Whoop. And know that from now on we should call it Austria-Hungary. Other than that, you're cool with Austria right here. Okay, let's move to Russia. In Russia, well, the czars, they weren't really into the whole industrialization thing. You have the church teaching people what it is to be right and wrong. They're in charge of education. They are in charge of everything to do with academia. They have an autocrat. The king, the czar, they call it there. Remember, that means Caesar. The czar is all powerful. And they believe Russian culture is the best, like DJ Khaled would say. So let's kind of trace in here where they get to the point where they feel like they have to compromise. Well, the Crimean War takes place, you might recall, in the 1850s. And you might be like, what is the Crimea? The Crimea is this area right here that I'm motioning to. And essentially, Russia goes after the Ottoman Empire, and the empire is weak, and Russia thinks they can attack them and take some territory off there. Because if you look at Russia's choices for expanding, it ain't looking good. Because Germany is rising in power. Because, remember, Germany in the late 19th century, by 1871, is totally unified. So at this point, Russia's like, well, can't mess with them because they dope. What about Austria? Let's not do that. Wait a second. What about the Ottomans? Easy pickings. So they go after Austria or the Ottomans. Problem. They claim it's over France being put in charge of holy Christian shrines, where Russia feels offended about this. It's not really about this. They say it's about this, but it's not really about this. It's a very old-fashioned kind of thing for a war. The Russians go into the Ottoman Empire and they lay some smack. They're going to fight down here in the Crimea. But as you might recall, if you've already written the Greek DBQ about their Greek independence, the French and the English are wary of what Russia is doing over in Eastern Europe. And by the 1850s, they're still wary. So they're going to get involved to prevent the Russians from being able to lay smack down. So you get a very weird thing where Britain and France are allied with the Turks. Remember, the Ottoman Empire is situated out of Turkey, against Russia. Russia would have had a chance against the Ottoman Empire. Okay, that's who they could have beat. Then you're putting Britain and France in there. Either one of those could beat Russia at this time. What does Russia have going for them? They're big. And, oh, wait. Industrialization means you can make factories that make weapons fast, too, can't you? Oh, and probably of a higher, quality is going to be higher, too. That's not good. And Britain and France are both very industrialized, especially compared to Russia. And they lay so much smack on Russia in this battle. It is not even funny. And really, this war is interesting because it's more famous for like the weird things about it. Like, if you've ever heard of Florence Nightingale and the idea of women as battlefield nurses, or this idea of the Red Cross, these people who are medics that are in charge of, we're not involved in the war, we're just here to help the sick. All of that comes out of the Crimean War. These are things around the same time. More died from disease than the actual war because they still didn't have a grasp on germ theory at this time in history, which is a real bummer. In 1878, Russia mad at Germany. Again, you can get mad all you want. Bismarck is like, don't really care that much that you're angry at me because we're allies. But hey, we're going to take some of these Balkan nations that have been trying to become independent of the Ottoman Empire. Now, pause for a second. What are the Balkans? The Balkans is this part of Europe. Like, look here. You've got here, like over here is Italy. So this is southeastern Europe here, and that's Greece. And they say, like, okay, the Ottoman Empire, let's kind of kick you further out of Europe, and we'll have Romania and Bulgaria and Serbia, and these will be independent places. And Russia doesn't like this because Russia wanted to take them over. Russia claims, and again, there's probably some truth to this, but hey, what about nationalism? We're all Slavic people because that is their nationality. The Russians are Slavic, and all of these places in southeastern Europe and the Balkans are also Slavic. So they're like, hey, we should be in charge of them. But nobody else in Europe is down with that because they're like, no, it'll give Russia too much power. And no one nation could have all that power. So the Tsar, Alexander II, says, look, guys, we need to change things. Russia is backwards, and this defeat has woken us up. Duh! How many times has this happened already? Didn't this same exact thing happen? Peter the Great goes to war with Sweden, loses initially, remember he won eventually, but initial battles in the Great Northern War, and he's like, oh, we need to reform. We need to make ourselves more European. He does, they end up winning. Well, the Crimean War's over, so they're not going to be able to win this war, but Alexander II says, we'll win the next war. So he starts forming all kinds of changes. He's the reforming czar, the czar liberator, he's sometimes called, because he frees all the serfs in 1861. Easy to remember this year, by the way, because 1861 is the same year the Civil War in the United States begins between the South and the North. And that also has to do with the emancipation of people who are unpaid laborers. So it might be easy to remember that. A zemstvo is like a local system of government. So it's basically, instead of like going to the noble and having them adjudicate you, like judge you and like all that, you actually have like local government doing it and officials appointed by the government, not just local nobles. It's better. It's not great, but it's better. So of course, this guy who has been the best czar since probably Catherine, what happens? They kill him. Whoa, wait, what? Some people are like, yep, you're not going far enough, pal. So Alexander II is in this carriage. It's a bulletproof carriage. A gift from Napoleon III of France. How did he die if it's a bulletproof carriage? Well, they threw a bomb at it. And good guy Alex gets out of the carriage and is all like, oh, man, my driver might have gotten killed. I better go check on him. And there was a second assassin waiting with another bomb. So they're all like, oh, he's another bomb. He's like, oh, what's that? Oh, and he goes home and dies. I think he dies in his dining room. I don't remember what room. Oh, that's who made that. I apologize, everyone. That's awful. Okay, so what's his son gonna do? Be a reactionary. What's the opposite of revolution? Reaction. So a revolutionary movement is often thought of as a leftist movement, like let's change things. A reactionary movement is like the conservatives strike back. And Alex III says, oh, so my dad wanted to change things and y'all killed him? I guess I'm going to have to crack down on everybody and be awful. So it has all the stuff it says here. He centralized authority even more. They had a slight movement prior to giving more power to the people, so he quickly takes that away. Um, Strict censorship, secret police, and the Okrana, that's the name of the secret police in case anyone ever asks you a trivia question, and believes that Russia still is the best, and also Jewish people don't belong in Russia. So he begins kind of blaming the Jews for Russia's problems. Many of them actually leave Russia and head west, which at the time would have been what will become Poland. At the time, it would have been Austria. And if you know anything about World War II, you know that that is where Adolf Hitler will kill the most of the Jewish population, is in Eastern Europe. Ironically, because they had left Russia because it was intolerant towards them. Things are just awful in history sometimes. Alexander III's son tries to be a reactionary as well. This is Nicholas II, but look at his little face. He's got kind eyes. He's got very dope facial hair. Look how pretty he looks. He's not a mean boy. He's a nice boy. And that guy, he tries his best, but I guess his best just isn't good enough. He gets into a war with Japan over having a warm water port in Korea. Now you might be like, okay, wait, what? Where'd Japan come from? What is this? This will make more sense when we get into imperialism. But basically, long story short, Japan had gotten forced to modernize after losing a skirmish with the Americans. The Japanese decide, like, all right, well, we're going to get Western. They're like, we're not going to let Russia roll all over us here. We're going to fight them. And they actually beat the Russians. Imagine how much it would have been terrible to be a Russian back then, at a time where you're trying to convince yourself that the Russians are the best, and it's a racist time period, so they're like, oh, we don't like Japanese people because we're awful and we're racist, and then they not only go to war with Japanese and lose, but it's Nicholas II's first big decision to go to war there. They have a revolution in 1905, partially because they have an awful economy, because again, they've never properly industrialized. The government never really threw its back into helping industrialization get going. Factories by 1905 are still as bad as they really were at the end of the 18th century in England as far as conditions for workers go. And a bunch of protesters led by an Orthodox priest named, what's his first name? I want to say Yorkie, but I might be wrong. But Father Gapone, he goes to the Tsar's palace. They stand there and peacefully want to read a letter asking the Tsar for help, because they don't even blame the guy. They just think like, hey, our situation here, it's real bad. So like maybe we could get some help from you. And the Tsar is not even at the palace, but the guards still act as though he is. And I've read different things. Some things say that the guards were acting under the assumption that the Tsar was in the palace. Others have said that the Tsar was gone and everybody knew it, but the guards still felt that they had to have like a strong, like, no, he's not going to see you. You're commoners. Anyway, this ends poorly. The guards end up firing on the men, women, and children, including the priest and other religious people. They're all unarmed. The guards obviously are not, killing hundreds, wounding thousands. This does not make Nicholas II very popular. He's already thought of as being somewhat of a failure after the Russo-Japanese War that begins in 1904 and ends in 1905. And then boom, right in 1905, you've got the Bloody Sunday Massacre, which earns him the nickname Bloody Nicholas. This is an illustration from that. You can clearly see here is the Winter Palace. You've got the protesters here, and the guards are just like, no guards died. So the Tsar, the revolution continues there. That just makes things like, whoa, and gets it going. And the Tsar says, okay, fine, I'll reduce censorship. He's not going to get rid of censorship, mind you. He's going to reduce it. He is going to give them a Duma. The Duma is like a parliament. Problem. The Duma that he gives them has no real power. Like, they can make suggestions, but if the Tsar doesn't like it, he doesn't have to obey. Also, the Tsar can just be like, you know what? I'm going to dismiss the Duma and you all have to go home. Can you imagine if the President of the United States had this power? Like, people would be like, that's the most unfair thing ever. That's unconstitutional, blah, blah, blah. Well, exactly. It was unconstitutional. The people wanted a constitution. He wasn't giving it to them. And think about, wow, is this kind of like the French Revolution, where the people want these changes, but they're not really giving the people the changes? How did that work out for the French and Louis XVI? Yeah, it's going to work out in a very similar way. Ooh, synthesis. What about that? Let's talk about that. Synthesis, yeah. Nicholas reforms don't really do much. The veto power is what he has over the Duma. He can ignore it if he wants. He can just say, like, nope. And there will be another revolt later on in 1917. What's going on culturally? I want to kind of throw this in here. Later 19th century, intellectual movements. Charles Darwin, that's him there. That's not him. That's an illustration by an enemy of his. And of course, if you guys have taken biology, you know Charles Darwin comes up with the theory of evolution by natural selection. He did not invent the theory of evolution. Others, including Lamarck, had done that before him. He's the one who comes up with the whole idea of natural selection. And he says that we, humans, had a common ancestor with apes. And of course, his critics then and still into the 21st century do not like that. So they portray him like, oh yeah, well, you're an ape man. And like, he wasn't an ape. Look, he's a sweet looking man here. He's not an ape man. Sigmund Freud, not really, yes, popular, but not as big as he'll be after World War I. But he's working and writing at this time. And he comes up with this idea that your unconscious mind motivates your behavior. So what you feel and what you do might be the result of something you're not even aware of. Interesting. So like, if I am upset about something when I see a clown on the television and it makes me angry. I'm like, wait a second, why would that make me angry? I don't know. Sigmund Freud would say like, oh, let's sit down, let's talk about your childhood. Oh, what's that? When you were 5, there was a clown at your birthday party and you wet your pants because you were scared, and now you get angry and embarrassed whenever you see clowns. I'm not saying that happened to me. I'm actually not afraid of clowns, and I never wet my pants at a birthday party, but you understand the point. The point would be your unconscious mind affecting your behavior. He's also big on dreams. He believes that your unconscious mind is just going wild while you're dreaming, and it's giving you all kinds of hints and clues as to what you should be doing or your secret desires. Freud is fixated on sex, and he feels everything is related to sex. I don't want to go into that. But the stereotype of your therapist laying you down on a couch while he sits there and he's like, tell me about your mother. That's a Freudian thing, because guess what? That's Sigmund Freud. And Freud is very big on asking about your mother. Ask your psych teacher at your school. Why? Whoop. Late 1800s. Photography. First photo. Not great. First selfie. Not great also. First moving photo. They figure out, like, oh, hey, we can take photos. We can put them all in a line. And then we can put a film. And we can make it go like, that's movies. Movies are invented. I kind of just threw this stuff in here at the end because I always have my students, they have like bad chronology, and they're like, so when do we stop having just paintings and then also get like, photos? It's the late 19th century. It's expensive, and as you saw here, not the most clear originally, but you do have, if you ever look at like American Civil War stuff, there are photographs at that time. And into the early 1900s, into the early 20th century, there is photographs as well, and even movies of some of the stuff prior to World War I. So there's that. All right? Hope you guys learned something, had a little bit of fun. I'm in a new room now. Look at my new room. This is my new room. It's pretty dope. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.